Hi, today I'm going to teach you the style of breath work that has completely changed my life. This style of breath work I discovered 8 years ago, and although there's a multitude of different types of breath work out there, and all of them are great, right? They all serve different purposes. This is the style that I keep coming back to time and time again. And I have to give a shout out to my teacher, my mentor, David Elliott, who has worked with thousands of people to train them to teach this style of breath work. And it's a transformational style that is meant to bypass the ego and get us into an altered state. It's done lying down and it gets us into, it moves us from the conscious mind into the subconscious for deep, deep healing and expansion. And in just a few minutes, I'll lay down and I'll show you the breath technique. I'll actually teach it to you. And you can use this in your own life frequently if you want to. And 8 years ago in 2018 is when I discovered this style. It completely blew me out of the water and it changed everything for me. Up to that point, I had done years and years of therapy, which really helped me and I really needed to. But up to that point, I had not done a more integrative approach. It was really just talk therapy. We processed things on the mental level, a bit on the emotional level as well. But breathwork actually took me into a whole different landscape, a whole different ballgame where I actually had incredible cathartic emotional releases that changed my whole life and cleared up a lot of space. And so this style of breath work is done usually for about 25 minutes. It's a longer form style. It's done all through the mouth and it works on the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual levels, which I'll guide you through in just a moment and talk you through those different levels. But this style of breath work was actually specifically designed and intentionally created to help us bypass the ego. The ego is not necessarily bad, but there's a higher and a lower expression of the ego. The lower ego, it really interferes in our life. Until you really understand and wake up to the concept that the ego is not actually you, it will convince you that it's you and it's not you. And so breath work for me, beyond an intellectual understanding that the ego is not me, breath work actually showed me and gave me an embodied experience of deep, profound homecoming, bringing me back to the truth of who I am, not just on an intellectual level, but I actually felt, experienced, and embodied it. And so that was 8 years ago. It absolutely helped me to break through. This style of breath work, because it gets us into an altered state, could be categorized with some of the other ways which you can get into an altered state, which are all valid. They all have their place, right? Plant medicine is huge these days. I think that has a place, but it's mind-blowing to me as somebody who, as a teenager, we were doing all of those things back then. It's mind-blowing that it's so popular right now. There's definitely an element to the popularity of it that is not actually organic. And so we do have to actually be wise and be discerning with all of that. It's a big conversation. I'm not going to touch on psychedelics here. But breath work, this style of breath work to get you into an altered state is probably the most empowering thing. Because when you're using plant medicine, you're in relationship with the plant. There is an exchange that happens, and these can be incredible allies on our path. But we're still outsourcing our power to something outside of us. And so it has its place. I'm not criticizing it at all. In fact, I'm a fan of microdosing. That's another video for another day. But breath work for me is my primary spiritual practice. And it feels so clean. That's the best way that I can describe it because we're using the power of our own breath. There's a purity to it that is indescribable until you actually begin to work with this style of breath work. So this breath work is so transformational and the potential for massive healing and growth within it is so profound that oftentimes people have a significant level of resistance to doing this style of breath work. So it's good to talk about this in advance so that you know what's happening. So the first few minutes of this style of breath work is what David, my teacher, calls the work phase. This is the part where the resistance actually comes up. I don't feel like doing this. This is dumb. This is too hard. Blah, 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 blah. Right. And so this comes up usually the first 5 minutes or so. And if you've ever listened to David's guided breath works on Spotify, which I'm going to link in the description here, if you want to try them, I highly recommend them. You'll often hear him just the first few minutes, all you have to do is just make that commitment. This is where the adult part of ourselves can actually have that discipline and that commitment because we understand and we know that this is for our highest good and that the resistance or the ego actually doesn't have our best interest in mind. It will try very hard to convince you that you don't need to be doing this or that it's a bad idea. 99% of the time, that's your ego getting in the way. I'm not going to discount that in rare circumstances, it might not be the best day to do breath work, right? This is tricky for people maybe who have a history of overriding their signals. It can be very difficult for them to actually do this. And that's a big conversation. But I can assure you in my own life, as well as working with clients, right? This is breath work that I do with clients one-on-one. I also am a breath work teacher I've led hundreds of groups as well. I can assure you with deep love that it's most likely not the case that it's the ego, is what I'm trying to say most of the time, right? But that being said, this type of breath work isn't for everybody, and it's not meant to be for everybody, right? You'll know if this style of breath work is something that your intuition is a yes to, right? And if you do have massive resistance and you abandon it, you have total free will to do that, not just at the beginning when the resistance is usually the most, but at any point in the breathwork experience, you have total free will to stop breathing. That's why I actually love this because there's a level of agency or you being in the driver's seat versus with plant medicine, you are giving your power away and you don't actually have a choice, which can be good sometimes in and of itself, right? But this style of breath work, you're in the driver's seat actually. At any given moment, if there's too much intensity in your body, because on the somatic or physical level, there can be a lot of energy that starts to run through the body. This is the first level that I'll cover with you because this is the first level that I start to feel it when I do breath work. So within a minute or two, and it's not the same for everybody, but with very soon after I do the breath work, I start to feel energy coursing through my body. It can feel like tingles, it can feel like electricity. This is chi, it's prana, it's life force energy, and breath, the word and the etymology is connected to spirit. And so we are actually, when we open up to increasing the amount of oxygen that we are receptive to and taking in, we're allowing ourselves to literally breathe life in more fully. I don't know about you, but I still am a very shallow breather when I'm just, unconsciously moving through my day. And I've been a breathwork teacher. That's probably one of the reasons why this style of breathwork is so useful for me, is because it's not how I normally breathe, and that's a good thing. So the physical level is where it starts. You start to kind of feel the tingles, right? Now, the physical level or the somatic level actually can start to get kind of intense for people. And if it does start to get too intense during the course of the breathwork experience, you just either slow the breathwork down or you can take a break. Especially if you're new, you might have to. You might actually not be able to do 25 or 30 minutes at the beginning. You might have to work your way up to it. That's why I love David Elliott's album called Spiritual Practice on Spotify because it gives you different lengths of time that you can try out. There's a 7-minute one, a 13-minute one, a 21-minute one, and a 28-minute one. And I love that he created that because it basically allows you to not only work your way up, but there's some days where I also don't have time to do a full session. So I might just do the 7-minute one. I mean, 8 years after discovering David's work, that's still one of my favorite ones, and I come back to it time and time again. So that being said, you don't have to have Spotify, you don't have to have someone facilitate, you don't have to do any of that. You can actually just watch me do the technique and practice it on your own at home. You can set a timer and you can do it for however long you want to, right? So I want to empower you to be able to know that you can do this on your own and it will change your whole life, right? It has healed things that years of therapy we're not able to heal because that therapy primarily stayed on the conscious level or with it working with the linear mind. And this style of breath work actually gets us into, it lifts the lid to get us into the subconscious, which is where the real work happens. Now, I just want to be careful to say that those years of therapy were absolutely necessary. I had the most amazing therapist, and that set the stage for me to actually be able to go deeper. If I didn't have that with her, I actually wouldn't, it just all happened the way that it did. I wouldn't have been able to actually, I probably would have resisted breath work and ran away in the other direction. So it really did prepare me to be able to go in because I had already with my therapist unpacked most of the trauma in my life. So I wasn't new to that. So that actually gave me a level of resilience and courage to be able to go in. So I really highly suggest that. And when I work with clients one-on-one, that's why I combine all of these things together. Most of my clients do the longer 90-minute sessions with me because it's a combination of us talking through things. And then the last 30 minutes are breath work so that we can have that dual nature of the linear and the nonlinear, the conscious and the subconscious. And these sessions, once I started to add breath work in, have cut the work in half. In fact, much faster than that. And so David was the one that encouraged me years ago to actually start to do breath work with my clients. Initially, I had resistance, all the stuff with scope of practice. And yeah, I can't even tell you, it's completely transformed my work in the world. And I'm so grateful for David and so grateful for breath work. It continues to just it makes me emotional because it's changed everything for me. So on the mental level, let's just talk about that level. What it does is it starts to bypass the ego and it starts to actually bring you into the higher mind. So it's not necessarily that we're like losing our mind during breath work, but we are escaping the confines of the lower mind or the ego. And so you will literally feel an expansion start to happen. Similarly to if you're familiar with altered states, right? You're going to feel the expansion happening. And it's really important that we remember that we are not these small selves. So it really helps us to expand into the truth of who we are. So on an emotional level, what happens, especially after you start to get the energy moving on a somatic level, on an emotional level, what that energy does is that it starts to work through the blocks, right, that we have. Physical, emotional, mental, spiritual are all connected. They all work together. And so this starts to loosen up any blocks or, areas of stagnation in the body. And so you can start to feel emotional. You can start to cry. You can start to laugh. You can start to actually feel anger come up and not have no idea why sometimes. And that's okay. We don't need to understand where it comes from. But the main thing is that we want to just be able to get it out. We want to be able to let it come out because otherwise, what it's showing you is that these things were stuck in your body and we don't want them to be stuck in our body, right? Gabor Mate has the incredible book that's just right over here called When the Body Says No. And that book is really wise because it shows us of when we suppress these emotions and they get stuck, they cause health problems, cancer, and all the other things. And that's a subject that's close to my heart as my mom passed away from cancer. And so when I do breath work, my mom is right here with me because she understands, right? And she knows. She's also part of my bigger work too with relationships because all this for me is family line stuff as it is for many of us. And so breath work, she's always here with me, right? And so we want to be able to do this work to really, sometimes they call it energetic hygiene. It's just helping us to cleanse and clear this stuff out of our system. So it can be very cathartic. But with the emotional releases, again, if it starts to get too overwhelming for you, what I love about this breath work is that you can start to just like slow the breath down or even take a break if it really does get overwhelming. So for me, it hasn't ever gotten to that point. In fact, it feels really good and it feels really cathartic to sort of let it flow rather than start to put a lid on it. That doesn't feel good for me, but we're all different, right? And so you have to be able to tune into yourself and what you're ready for. And so with this breath work, you can stop the breath at any time, right? And so that's what I love. So you don't have to throw yourself off the cliff. Oftentimes when I teach, I tell my clients to find that sweet spot, right? Where they're kind of riding their edge, right? You don't want to throw yourself off the cliff, but you also don't want to hold back. And so breathwork's really good at being able to train our nervous systems to find that sweet spot, which is the perfect place theoretically for transformation. Because if we do throw ourselves off the cliff, then we blow ourselves out and it usually backfires. But if we hold back, then we're really not doing much, right? And so that's just the ego that wants to keep you safe. So this style of breath work, although it's very much like okay, I'm going to lay down and do it now, it actually builds these muscles for life, right? Because you take it off of the mat and then you're able to actually understand how to find your edge in life. So it's not just that the transformation happens on the mat, right? Okay, so I talked about the physical level, emotional level, mental level. Spiritually, it is literally my bridge to God. I've been saying this for years because it's the only way that I can properly explain this style of breath work. What it does is it opens the channel. It opens that intuitive channel to connect you with your higher self, God, spirit, the universe, whatever you want to call that. Now, does this happen every time? No, right? But if you have, for example, a lot of stuff that you need to clear, if you have a lot of trauma, you might have to spend some time clearing things out. Maybe that'll take a few sessions. I mean, we're all different, right? And also, when I lay down to do breath work, sometimes it's like very much emotional stuff that comes out. Sometimes it's very much intuitive downloads. Sometimes it's really a somatic experience primarily, right? It's more in the physical or it's more in the emotional or spiritual, etc. So what I love about breath work is that it basically takes you exactly where you need to go. So when we surrender and we actually trust the breath work, it has a level of incredible intelligence that will take you exactly where you need to go on that day. So I think I'm going to actually just lay down and describe this and show you the practice right now. I will link an hour-long podcast episode where I have said everything that I've ever wanted to share about breath work. That's probably my most comprehensive resource, right? If you want to get into the nuts and bolts of this practice. I also have a couple other links to videos that I've shared about breath work that can help you. And I think the last thing that I just want to say is that sometimes when the somatic energy is running through your body, the hands, especially if you're new, can start to kind of cramp. They can start to close up and cramp like this. It's called tetany, and it happens because the body isn't used to this level of oxygen, and it's not something for you to be scared about. It's not dangerous at all. If you stop the breath and just return back to a normal breathing style, it's just your hands are going to relax back. You can even sort of open and close them. If it happens, you can kind of shake them out. If it happens, it's really not a big deal. Or you can just breathe through it. I usually just breathe through it if it happens, right? Because I know that as soon as I shift into shavasana or resting at the end, which I always recommend, by the way, that the hands will naturally just open in a few minutes. So it's really not a big deal. And on a metaphysical level, my teacher David says that because the hands are an extension of the heart, right? Because they're an extension of the heart chakra. If we have a lot that we need to clear here, sometimes it can cause a whole lot of energy that really is tough for us to get through, and that's okay. It's just a sign and a signal that, okay, maybe breath work is something I need to do more regularly. Maybe there's something there for me. So don't let it trip you up, right? Just do the best that you can. It does happen frequently to beginners. But for me, after the first few times, it just stopped happening. So What else do I want to share? I think I'm going to lay down now. So I'm going to mute the camera so you can see me. Okay. All right, let me see. Yeah, we're good. Okay, so this breath is done all through the mouth, like I told you. And it's a two-part inhale where the first inhale goes into the belly. It's kind of like the first half of your inhale goes here. And then the second half goes into the heart, or the high chest, as we call it. And so it looks like this. So belly, chest, out. And so I'll just kind of breathe on my own for maybe a minute or so you can see me. And if you want to lay down, you can do it with me as well, or you can pause this and lay down. But here's how I do it. Okay, so you can see that there is a bit of a separation between the two inhales. So it's not like they flow together, like, right? There's a little, like a tiny pause in between. So they're kind of these separate inhales, and you don't need to exaggerate the pause in between, but maybe when you're learning and you're practicing and you're getting used to this technique, you might want to sort of exaggerate it a little bit and go a little bit slower. And so that's fine, right? If you want to breathe a little bit slower like that at the beginning and just get the rhythm down, right? It's really good for you to be able to say, okay, here's my first go around with breath work. I'm going to do at least 5 minutes of it. Otherwise, you're not going to really be able to have the full experience. And once you get the rhythm down and you're more comfortable, I highly suggest that you try one of the longer breathwork audios. Try the 7-minute one to start, and then you can work your way up. The 21-minute one on that spiritual practice album is my absolute favorite. I also have breathwork recordings that I've done. The first one is called Heart Opening Breathwork, where I guide you, and it's a very powerful experience of practicing giving and receiving love. It's really powerful. That's available for purchase on my website. It's a very low cost. And I also have a reparenting breathwork as well. And so you can try those out. You can also work with me one-on-one when I facilitate breathwork, or you can jump into one of my breathwork groups. I also teach breathwork live in person here in Los Angeles. And so I just want to show you a couple of things. The first one is that you can actually play with the speed of the breath, and it really depends on what you feel like doing. You might want to play with the speed during your breath work, right? And so there's no right speed. I would say you don't want to do it so slow that you're not really doing anything, but you also don't need to do it super fast either. So each time I lay down and do breath work, it's different every time. I try to honor my intuition and how I'm feeling. And if I'm feeling a little bit more tired, I might want to just do a little bit more gentle, slow breath work. And I have incredible experiences with that. Other times when I feel like I have a lot of energy and I want to go for it, maybe I want to do faster breath. And so I'll just show you a couple of ways. Like I'll do a little bit faster, and then I'll just do a little bit slower. So this is a little bit of a quicker pace here. Okay, so you'll notice that when I go a little bit quicker, my depth of breathing is actually not super deep. And I allow my breaths to be even a little bit more shallow because I want to play with the speed a little bit to see how it impacts me. If you do it a little bit slower, you can do more shallow breaths if you're new, right? Or it gives you a chance to actually go deeper with the breath. So this is the second lever that you can play with to alter your breathwork experience, is how deep versus how shallow am I breathing? So here's slower but deeper breathing. And so I already actually feel this one, even though I slowed it down a little bit, the deeper that you breathe, the more oxygen you're getting in. And so that can actually facilitate the breakthrough into what we call the opening faster. So the opening is really when you are getting altered, right? You're entering into that nonlinear domain and you can feel it happening. So we call it the opening. For me, after doing years of breath work, I tend to go right in. But at the beginning, sometimes it would take me 5 or 10 minutes to break through. And so it really depends on sort of the level of like the crust of the ego. And there's no shame, right? There's some days that it takes me longer to get in, and there's some days I'll go right in. So it's not about judging ourselves, but it's just about knowing what might happen. Right. And so I think for people who do have a really strong ego that likes to grip and control, this silent breath work can be very hard and confronting. But if you can grasp onto um, a willingness, maybe there's part of you, despite that, that knows this is going to be really good for you. I suggest that you actually stick with it, right, and do a few breathwork sessions. And so, yeah, I think that's all that I want to show you here. So again, it's just belly, chest out, right? And on the exhale, you don't have to push it or force it. Just let it kind of come naturally. And what you want to do eventually is to be able to get to a place where you feel so comfortable with the rhythm, your body's used to it, and you don't have to think every step of the way of what you're doing. This is why practicing is so beautiful, right? And so the exhale can be just be a simple release. So, right, you don't have to push it out, you don't have to force it, just let it sort of fall out of you, right? And so, yeah, just make breath work your own. I'm going to come back now and just say a few words. Okay, so I'm here if you have questions about breath work. I'm going to also post a link to David's website, and he's available for one-on-one sessions as well as he does trainings all over the world. Some of them are also online. And I facilitate breath work one-on-one with people. I also run groups, like I said, so you're welcome to jump in. You can also just do the pre-recorded meditations that I've created. David has a bunch of albums on Spotify, so there's tons of ways for you to start to tap into this. You can also just create your own playlist and do it on your own, right? That's beautiful. For me, I go the deepest when in a one-on-one session, right? So many people do, right? If someone's facilitating and holding that space, it allows you to really drop in, and the co-creation of those two energy fields coming together, me and my teacher, or like me and you breathing, right, adds a really powerful dimension that's not there when we breathe on our own. That being said, I do still breathe on my own, and it's very powerful to do that. Sometimes when I breathe on my own, it gives me the space and the permission to actually go, like, just be totally like to go for it, right? Because nobody's watching, and then I can make all of the sounds, I can move my body, and this is something I'll just pause on for a minute. With the exhales, you can assist yourself to move stuck energy by just doing an audible sigh or some kind of sounding. Right? You can just like really push it out using sounding, and it can be very, very powerful. Now, you don't have to do this with every exhale, right? Sometimes when David teaches, he encourages sounding, but he also says, like, don't get yourself overly distracted by the sounds because then you can lose the rhythm, etc. So just use your own discernment and just follow your body. If it feels like there's stuck stuff, or even if you're having a lot of resistance, you probably have stuff in there, maybe frustration or whatever it is that needs to come out. So just play with the sounding. Also, when I breathe, sometimes I'll shake out my arms, right? Like shake out my legs, move my hips, right? Move your body in a way, like if it feels like you need to, I would say do it, this is another thing too with David's teaching where he encourages that, but then also don't get so kind of immersed in like moving all around that you aren't focused on the breath, right? So you want to find that sweet spot of moving, but I find it to be very helpful sometimes to move. There's a lot of stuff that gets stuck in our hips. And so when you lay down, you can also, sometimes I lift my hips up and I like, it's sometimes I don't want to say like it, I'll just show you real quick, right? This is just me. But when I breathe, sometimes I do put my knees up, right? Which you can do also if you start to feel ungrounded. That can help you to be more grounded. But a lot of times, because I have a lot of stuff stuck in my hips and even the lower back, for people who have sexual trauma, this can be the case. And so if you just like go like this and just like really wiggle and just do that. It can help the energy, can help break up that stagnant energy. So, okay, my alarm's going to go off in a second because I have to meet with a client, which it's doing right now. And so I would say, yeah, I actually recorded this for longer than I thought. So it gives you pretty much everything you need to get started. In addition to check the description, because I'm going to put a lot of links in there for you to start today to practice breath work. Please reach out if you have any questions, and I hope to see you soon.